Hello friends, welcome to the CEC-UGC live lecture. Dear friends, with our ongoing series on microeconomics, today we would be talking on the two important topics. In the first half, we would be discussing on Kinked Demand Curve Analysis under Oligopoly, whereas in the second half, we would be discussing on objectives of firms. And for this very discussion, we have once again with us in our studios Dr. Kamlesh Ghakkar. Dr. Kamlesh Ghakkar is a professor in IMSAR, Maharishi Dayananda University, Rohtak. So let's welcome our guest, Dr. Kamlesh Ghakkar, and let's try to get more and more knowledge. Hello ma'am, welcome to the EduSec lecture.
Thank you. Dear viewers, today I am going to tell you about what is Kinked Demand Curve Analysis under Oligopoly. The Kinked Demand Curve Analysis, actually as a tool of analysis, it originated from Chamberlain's intersection of individual demand curve and its market share demand curve. So far as the individual demand curve is concerned, it is drawn on the assumption that if one firm increases or decreases the price of the product, others will not follow. While the market share demand curve is based on the assumption that if one firm increases or decreases the price, others are going to follow. So this is actually the basis of kink in the demand curve. Hall and Hitch, in their famous article Price Theory and Business Behavior, use the kinked demand curve not as a tool for the determination of the price under oligopoly, but to explain why the price once determined on the basis of average cost principle will remain sticky. So Hall and Hitch use the kinked demand curve to explain the stickiness of price in oligopolistic markets, but not as a tool for the determination of price itself. However, in the same year, 1939, Paul Sweezy published an article in which he introduced the kinked demand curve as an operational tool for the determination of equilibrium in oligopolistic markets. The Sweezy model is based on a very specific assumption regarding how other firms will respond to price increases and price cuts. An industry is characterized as a Sweezy oligopoly if there are a few firms in the market serving many consumers. The firms produce differentiated products. Each firm believes that rivals will cut their prices in response to a price cut, but will not raise their prices in response to a price increase. And barriers to entry exist. As the manager of a firm competing in a Sweezy model believes that other firms will not match any rise in price, but will match price increases. The demand curve for the firm's product is given by DED1 as shown in figure 1. In figure 1, output is measured on x-axis and price has been measured on y-axis. Small dd curve is the subjective demand curve and capital DD1 is the objective demand curve or market share demand curve. So the actual demand curve faced by the oligopolist is DED1. The part DE of the curve, which is above the prevalent price OP, is actually the part of the subjective demand curve, in which it is believed that if price is raised above OP, the other firms will not follow. So the portion DE is more elastic, and the lower part ED1, it is a part of the objective demand curve or market demand curve DD1. Here it is believed that if price is reduced below OP, all other firms will follow. So that is why the lower portion of the demand curve ED1 is less elastic. So there is a kink in the demand curve at the prevailing price, and this is at E and price is OP. Now we will see how this kink in the demand curve leads to gap in MR curve. Now this is shown in figure 2, how we draw the marginal revenue curve. DED1 is the demand curve faced by an oligopolist where kink is at E. So we will draw the MR, and MR is having a gap. DA portion of the MR corresponds to the upper part DE, and the lower part of the MR starts from B, and this BKMR responds to the ED1 part of the demand curve, and there is a gap in the MR curve from A to B. So we find that there is a gap in MR curve, or MR curve becomes discontinuous because of the difference in the elasticities of the demand curve, DE part, the above part, and ED1 as the lower part. And due to the MR curve, we have seen that there is a kink, and now we see that the equilibrium of the firm is defined by the point of the kink, because at this point to the left of the kink MC is below MR, while to the right of the kink MC is larger than MR. It is not necessary that MC cuts MR at point A or at point B. It may pass through the discontinuous portion AB of MR. Costs may change in this range, but equilibrium price and output would remain constant. The length of the discontinuous portion depends upon the relative elasticities of two segments DE and ED1 of the demand curve at point E. The greater the difference in the elasticities, the greater would be the length of discontinuous portion of marginal revenue curve. So we have seen in the earlier diagram in figure 2, we can see that if the cost changes, there will not be any change in the price. You can see that if the marginal cost is MC1 or it is MC2 or even it is above and passing through at point A, or it decreases and passes through point B, but it is passing through the gap. So the price will remain OP. It is not going to change. So here we have shown that the price under oligopoly market remains sticky even if there is a change in the marginal cost of production, provided this marginal cost curve cuts to the discontinuous part of marginal revenue curve. And we can also show that if there is a change in the demand but price will still remain the same, it will remain inflexible, it will remain sticky. So we will show this in the diagram or in figure 3. Here we will show that demand has increased, demand rises, but again there is a kink, and due to the kink we know there is a discontinuity in marginal revenue curve, or there is a gap in the marginal revenue curve. And if MC or the marginal cost is cutting through this gap, we will find that price remains same. It is not increased due to increase in the demand. This is shown in figure 3. So here you can see in figure 3 we have shown output on x-axis, and on y-axis we have shown price, cost and revenue. DE D1 is the first demand curve where there is a kink at E and there is D to A and is the MR curve D to A, and again it is starting from B. So there is a gap in the MR curve. We know that the equilibrium condition is where MC cuts MR and it is cutting from below. So AB is the gap in the first MR curve when the demand curve is having a kink at E and price is the OP. But now suppose that the demand curve changes, demand rises and the new demand curve is D2, E1 and D2. Here now the kink is at E1, and what do you see here? We will again draw the MR curve corresponding to D to E1, one part, and the other part corresponding to E1 D2, and we find that there is a gap of A1 B2 in the marginal revenue curve, and you see here that marginal cost is cutting through this gap, and here also the kink is at the same level. So we find that price remains OP. It is not increased in spite of the increase in the demand curve. So till we have explained that whether there is a change in the cost or whether there is a change in demand, price remains sticky because of this kink in the demand curve, and that was kink was why? Because there is difference in the elasticities of demand, that upper portion is more elastic and lower portion is less elastic. Now we will see that actually will the price always remain the same whenever the costs and demand conditions undergo a change. It is not necessary that it will always be the same. It depends upon what type of the cost and demand conditions are there in the market. Number one is we take the case of decline in costs. In the case of declining costs, price is more likely to be stable. When the cost of production falls, then the segment of the demand curve above the current price becomes more elastic, as with lower costs, increase in price will not be followed by rival firms. The upper portion will become more elastic. Why? You can think of that if the costs go on declining, then every firm would like to cut the price to attract more customers. If one firm increases the price, others will not follow because they will be afraid of losing the customers. Cost is already falling and their profits will not rise if they have less customers. So we find that the upper portion will become more elastic, that other firms will not match any price rise by any firm. So there will be more elastic part above the current price. And so far as the lower part is concerned, naturally when costs are declining and if one firm reduces the price, others will definitely follow the price fall, because they would not like that their customers should go to the rival firm, and by reducing the price because of the declining cost, their profits are not going to get reduced, so they will follow the price cuts. So the lower portion will become less elastic, because when all will decrease the price, their demand would not increase as much as only one firm thinks. It will be distributed among all the firms. So because of the greater difference between the elasticities of demand, naturally there is going to be a wider gap in the marginal revenue curve, or there will be discontinuity in the MR curve, and the greater the gap, there is a possibility that marginal cost curve will pass through this gap and price will remain sticky. So we find that in case of the declining costs, prices remain sticky. Now the case of rise in costs. When the costs are rising, naturally we will find that now the price rise may be followed by the rival firms, making the segment of the demand curve above the current price less elastic. Because when all will follow the increase in price, then naturally the loss in demand for one firm would not be much, because everyone has increased the price. So there would not be much loss of the customers, or there would not be too much fall in the demand in proportion to the increase in price. So the upper portion now will become less elastic, and so far as the lower portion is concerned, which is below the current price, and if one firm reduces the price because of the rising costs, we can hope, or it is possible, that the other firms will not follow the fall in price. So naturally the lower portions elasticity will increase. So we find that now there is again the difference in the elasticities will become smaller, and when the smaller is there, gap in the MR curve will also become narrow, and it is not necessary now that MC cuts through the gap. It may cut above E, and we will find that price will rise and output will decline. So we can say that in case of the rising costs, it is not necessary that price will remain sticky. Now we take the case of decrease in demand. In the situation of decreasing demand, again price under oligopoly is very likely to remain inflexible and will not fall when demand decreases. It becomes more certain that price cut will be followed by other firms. The upper portion of the demand curve will become more elastic and the lower portion will become more inelastic, and the discontinuous part of the MR curve will widen, and it is most likely that MC passes through the gap and price remains unchanged. So just like the decreasing costs, the decrease in demand is also of the same case. You can find that when in the economy demand is already falling and a firm reduces the price of the commodity, others will definitely follow that, because otherwise they will lose their customers. So the lower portion will become less elastic, and so far as the price rise is concerned, if one firm raises the price, others will not follow. So the upper portion will become more elastic, leading to increase in the gap in MR curve, and the greater the gap, the more is the possibility of MC curve passing through the gap, and price will remain again sticky, or the current price will prevail in spite of the change in demand. Price will not change. Now in case of increase in demand, we find that if an oligopolist initiates the increase in the price, he can expect that others will follow him, and the upper segment DE will become less elastic, and the angle DED1 will become obtuse. Consequently, gap in MR curve will narrow down. MC may cut MR above the gap, leading to rise in price. So, in case of the increase in demand, just like the increase in costs, we find that when the firms find that people are buying more and more, demand keeps on rising. So, rise in price by one firm will be matched by the other firms, and the upper portion will become less elastic, and we will find that the gap in the MR curve due to the kink will decline, and there is a possibility that there will be a rise in price and output will be less due to increase in demand. So, thus kinked demand curve analysis explains why prices remain sticky, and we have seen that they remain sticky in case of falling costs and declining demand, but in case of rising demand and rising cost, they may not remain sticky. Now, we will see what is the criticism against this kinked demand curve analysis. You know, any analysis is not having only the good points. There are always some shortcomings of every theory. So, now we will see what are the drawbacks or defects of kinked demand curve analysis. So, first criticism that kinked demand curve analysis tells us why prices remain rigid under oligopoly, but it has not explained how the existing price is determined. This criticism applies to CEC's model. In CEC's model, he has expressed that because of the kink, there is a gap in MR, and MC cutting through the gap in MR leads to the same price, and price remains sticky. But he could not explain from where this price, the current price, has come, how it has been determined. But this does not apply to Hall and Hitch. Hitch's theory, they say that prevailing price is equal to the average cost of production, and this is shown in figure 4. In figure 4, we have shown output on x-axis, price and cost are shown on the y-axis. DED1 is the demand curve, and there is a kink at point E, which is the prevailing price OP, because the upper portion is more elastic, or that is a part of the subjective demand curve, and the lower part ED1 is a part of the objective or market share demand curve. And here we have shown that average cost is tangent at point E. No doubt it is not the lowest point of AC, showing that average cost is not minimum, and there is not full or optimum use of the capacity of the plant, but here price is equal to the average cost of production, and the firm is getting only normal profits. So, in Hall and Hitch, it tells us that price is determined at the point of the kink where average cost is tangent to the demand curve. But CEC could not explain how the prevailing price is being determined. Secondly, kinked demand curve theory does not apply to price leadership and price cartels under oligopoly. In price leadership and price cartels, you know that they are examples of collusive oligopoly, in which in price leadership, price is determined by the leader firm and other firms follow it, and we have already completed this in the earlier lectures. And even in cartels also, a cartel is formed and a central authority decides what is the price to be charged, and kink has nothing to do in these theories. So, this does not apply to the price leadership and cartels. Then we have already seen that prices don't remain sticky in all the conditions. They are going to remain sticky only in case of declining costs or declining demand conditions. But when demand is rising or costs are rising, there is a possibility, and definitely generally it happens that prices are increased and output is reduced in case of rising costs and in case of increasing demand conditions. We see in the market also, we can find, you can see that if demand goes on rising, you will find that prices charged by the oligopolists are increasing. Then Kinked demand curve analysis mainly applies during the period of depression. You know, depression is a period when demand goes on declining. People buy less because there is a situation of increasing unemployment, incomes are falling. When incomes are falling, demand also goes on declining. And we have seen that whenever demand goes on declining, naturally the upper portion of the demand curve will become more elastic and lower portion will become less elastic, and the discontinuity in the MR curve will go on increasing, or gap will be widening, leading to the possibility of prices remaining sticky. So, but in case of inflation and boom, price is likely to rise rather than remaining stable. You know, when there is a boom, incomes of the people are rising, employment is rising, people are willing to buy more and more, they are willing to pay also. So, in that time period, you will find that prices don't remain sticky, rather they increase. So, according to Stigler, the theory of kinking demand curve explains why prices that have been stable should continue to be stable despite certain changes in demand or costs. But the theory does not explain why the prices that have once changed should settle down, again acquire stability and gradually produce a new link. Thank you. यार मैंने आज वो Dear viewers, in this module we will be discussing about various objectives of a firm. All business firms have undoubtedly some organizational goals to pursue. Conventional theory of the firm assumes profit maximization as the sole objective of business firms. Recent researches on this issue reveal that the objectives the business firms pursue are more than one. Some important objectives other than profit maximization are maximization of sales revenue, maximization of firm's growth rate, management utility maximization, making satisfactory rate of profit, long run survival of the firm, entry prevention and risk avoidance. Firstly, we will see how the profit is the business objective. There are two important concepts of profits, which are accounting profit and economic profit. Accounting profit is the surplus of revenue over and above all paid costs, including both manufacturing and overhead costs. Accounting profit is equal to total revenue minus wages plus rent plus interest plus cost of materials. When all these costs, which are inclusive of wages, rent, interest paid and the cost of material, that is actually the total explicit cost of production. When this is deducted from total revenue, this is called accounting profit. But economic profit takes into account the implicit costs also. The implicit cost is the opportunity cost. The opportunity cost of an entrepreneur includes the salary he could have earned, the rent on his own land used for the business and interest on his own capital. Pure profit or economic profit is equal to total revenue minus explicit costs and implicit costs together. So, total cost now includes explicit cost as well as implicit costs. So, you see that the economic profit is calculated only when we deduct explicit costs and implicit costs from the total profit. And naturally this economic profit will also consider what are the other things, just like insurance premium, depreciation, that will also be deducted from the total revenue. Now we will see what are the different theories of profits, or why profits should be there for an entrepreneur. One theory is Walker theory of profit. According to Professor F.A. Walker, profit is the rent of exceptional abilities that an entrepreneur may possess over others. Just as rent is the difference between the yields of the least and the most fertile lands, profit is the difference between the earnings of the least and the most efficient entrepreneurs. So, the entrepreneur's efficiency is not the same. Some are more efficient, some are less efficient. So, we will see who is the most efficient entrepreneur and the difference between his yield or his earnings and the earnings of the least efficient or the less efficient entrepreneurs will tell us what will be the profits of entrepreneurs. If all the entrepreneurs were of the same efficiency, then profits would not have been there. But profits are there because of the difference in the efficiency of entrepreneurs. Another theory is Clark's dynamic theory of profit. So, just as the name suggests, here the profits arise because of the dynamism in the economy. The profits will not arise if the economy is static. In dynamic economy, there is increase in population, increase in capital, improvement in production technique, changes in the forms of business organization and multiplication of consumer wants. These changes increase the sales and reduce costs, resulting in increased profits of the entrepreneur. Another theory is Hawley's risk theory of profits. F.B. Hawley propounded this theory in 1893. Entrepreneur has to bear various business risks for such reasons as obsolescence of a product, sudden fall in prices, non-availability of certain crucial materials, introduction of a better substitute by a competitor, and risks due to fire, war, etc. So he gets profit as a reward for risk taking. So according to Hawley, the entrepreneur gets profit because he is the bearer of risks. Another theory is given by Professor Knight. Knight's theory of profit is also known as uncertainty theory of profits. This theory says that entrepreneur has to bear two types of risks. Some risks are certain, like they can be insured, like the risks due to theft, due to fire, etc. they can be insured. But there are uncertain risks, like what will be the change in the policy by the government, whether the demand will rise or fall, whether there will be some new product in the market. These risks are uncertain, they cannot be insured. So the entrepreneur gets profit for bearing these uncertain risks. Another theory is Schumpeter's innovation theory of profits. This theory says that an entrepreneur gets profit because he is the innovator. What type of the innovations can be there? There can be introduction of a new product, there can be introduction of a new market, there can be a new source of raw material, there can be a new method of production or new form of organization. All these innovations either lead to increase in demand, leading to rise in price, or they can lead to fall in the cost of production, and both these forces will increase the profits of the entrepreneur. One entrepreneur innovates, then others follow. So profits are wiped out. But again, some entrepreneurs make innovations, so this cycle goes on. So this is the Schumpeter's innovation theory of profits. Another is monopoly theory of profits. So this theory says that it is because of the monopoly market that there are profits. Monopolist has the power to control price and output. There are strong barriers to entry. These powers help a monopoly firm to make pure profit. So monopoly is the source of pure profit. These were the certain theories which tell us why there are profits. Now we see how the profit maximization is the main objective of business firms. No alternative hypothesis explains and predicts the behavior of firms better than profit maximizing assumption. What are the profit maximizing conditions? So total profit is equal to total revenue minus total cost. Symbolically it will be pi. Pi is profit is equal to TR minus TC. There are two conditions for maximizing profits. This we have already done when we have done the equilibrium in the different markets. These two conditions are, first one is the necessary condition, that is marginal cost is equal to marginal revenue, and second order condition or secondary condition, which is the sufficient condition, required one, that is that MC cuts MR from below, or you can say the slope of marginal cost is greater than the slope of the marginal revenue. When both these conditions are met, the firm gets the maximum profits. This is shown in figure 1. In figure 1, we have shown output on x-axis, and on y-axis we have shown marginal cost and marginal revenue. We know that under imperfect competition, which can be the case of monopolistic competition or oligopoly, the MR goes on declining. That in order to sell more, the firm reduces the price, so AR is falling and MR is below it. And here we have shown only MR curve. And marginal cost curve is of this shape. Firstly it is falling, it becomes minimum, and then it is rising. So MC is cutting MR at 2 points A and B. First condition is met at A also, MC is equal to MR. But here the second condition is not being met, because here MC is cutting it from above. You can find that if output is OM1, it is not the point of maximum profits. We can get more profit if the output is increased from OM1 to OM2. So at OM2 level of output, we find that MC is cutting MR from below, or after this point MC is more than MR. So B is the point of equilibrium where both the conditions of profit maximization are met. Marginal cost is equal to marginal revenue and marginal cost is cutting MR from below. Now we will see what is the controversy over profit maximization objective. All economists don't believe that the modern day firms are having the objective of profit maximization. So what are the arguments they give? That there are other objectives which are being followed by the modern firms. There is a separation of management from the ownership. Managers set goals for the firm other than profit maximization. Large firms pursue goals like sales maximization, maximization of managerial utility, maximization of firm's growth rate, making a target rate of profit, or retaining market share. So because of the separation of management from ownership, these new or the alternative objectives are there which are followed by managers rather than profit maximization. Secondly, the traditional theory of the firm assumes that a firm has complete knowledge of demand and cost conditions. But we know that in practical life, this perfect knowledge is missing and firms have to operate in the world of uncertainty. So price and output decisions are made on probabilities. Naturally, when the firms are not having the knowledge of demand curve, then actually it will be difficult for them to find out the marginal revenue curve. And you know that for equilibrium we need marginal revenue curve and marginal cost curve. Without the marginal revenue curve, we cannot know what will be the equilibrium, output and price which maximizes the profits. Another criticism is that empirical studies have shown that firms don't equate marginal cost and marginal revenue. Most firms aim at long run profit maximization. In the short run, they set the price of the product on the basis of average cost principle so as to cover average cost is equal to average variable cost plus average fixed cost and normal margin of profit. And the average cost pricing is widely used by the firms. So empirical studies have also found that the price is set according to the average cost of production and the equilibrium is not seen by the way of marginal cost and marginal revenue. But still there are arguments in defense of profit maximization hypothesis. These are as following. Number one is indispensability of profits for the survival of a firm. In the present day world, when the competition is rising day by day, the main problem is of the survival of a firm, but for this survival also, it is required that a firm should have maximum profits. Then it has the possibility of surviving in the market. Then ability to make profits helps in achieving other goals. The other goals like sales maximization, managerial utility maximization, or achieving a target rate of profit, all these are possible to achieve only if the firm is having the primary objective of making profit. Then there is no conclusive evidence against profit maximization objective. Profit maximization is a time-honored objective of business firms. Evidence against this objective is non-conclusive or unambiguous. Greater predicting power of profit maximization objective. Profit maximization objective has been found to be a much more powerful premise in predicting certain aspects of the firm's behavior. So, firm's behavior can also be predicted in a better way by using the, or if the firms have the goal of profit maximization. Profit is a more reliable measure of firm's efficiency. Firms having profits are considered to be efficient. Profits are a source of internal finance which is very essential for the growth of the firm. If firms are having profits, these profits can be used for financing the further growth of the firm. So, naturally it measures the efficiency of a firm also. So, this was about that the main objective of the firm is to have the maximization of profits. No doubt some economists are of the view that it may not be maximum profits, but reasonable profits are required or needed for a firm, because it will not like to have maximum profits because of the fear of potential entrants or because of the interference of the government, but reasonable profits must be there for a firm. Now we will look on to what are the various other objectives which are followed by the modern firms. They are: number one is Baumol's hypothesis of sales revenue maximization. According to sales maximization model introduced by William Baumol and others, managers of modern corporations seek to maximize sales after an adequate rate of profit has been earned to satisfy stockholders. Managers pursue this goal because of the following reasons. Number one is salaries and other earnings of managers are more closely related to sales revenue than to profits. Banks and financial corporations finance the corporations on the basis of their sales. Sales revenue is a readily available indicator of firm's performance. Increasing sales revenue enhances the prestige of managers. Managers find it difficult to achieve profit maximization. Growing sales strengthen competitive spirit of the firm in the market. So, these are the reasons which tell us that the firms want to maximize their sales rather than profit maximization, because if sales increase, manager salaries will rise, and if sales are rising, firms will be getting more finance from banks, etc., and it tells us about the efficiency of a firm, etc. So, this tells us that sales revenue is the main objective of the firm. It is given by Baumol, and we will do this in detail also in the coming lectures. Now, another objective is Maris hypothesis of maximization of firm's growth rate. According to Robin Maris, managers maximize firm's balanced growth rate subject to managerial and financial constraints. Firm's balanced growth rate G is equal to GD is equal to GC. GD refers to growth rate of demand for firm's product, and GC refers to growth rate of capital supply to the firm. Firm's growth rate is balanced when demand for its product and supply of capital to the firm increase at the same rate. According to Maris, two growth rates are translated into two utility functions. One is manager's utility function UM, which is equal to or which is a function of salary, power, job security, prestige and status of managers. And the other is owner's utility function UO. This is equal to, this is a function of output, capital, market share, profit and public esteem. So, firm's growth rate depends upon GD and GC. And other objective is Williamson's hypothesis of maximization of managerial utility function. Oliver Williamson and others have introduced a model of management utility maximization, which postulates that with the advent of modern corporations and resulting separation of management from ownership, managers are more interested in maximizing their utility measured in terms of their compensation, which is salaries, fringe benefits, stock options, etc. The size of their staff, extent of control over the corporation, lavish offices, etc., rather than maximizing corporate profits. So, this managerial utility U is a function of SMID. S is for additional expenditure on staff, M is for managerial emoluments and ID is for discretionary investment. So, according to Williamson's model, instead of the profit maximization, the firms in the modern world maximize the managerial utility function, which depends upon the powers of managers, what is their power of discretionary investment, how many members are working under them and what are the facilities or perks they are getting. They want to maximize that, and you find that this is happening in today's business firms, that the CEOs or the managers are getting huge amount of salaries and perks, and profit maximization is not the sole objective of the firm. So, but according to this hypothesis, managers maximize their utility function subject to a satisfactory profit. A minimum profit is necessary to satisfy the shareholders, or else manager's job security is endangered. So, minimum profits are necessary. Williamson's model fails to deal with the problem of oligopolistic interdependence. This theory holds true only when rivalry between firms is not strong. In case of strong rivalry, profit maximization is claimed to be a more appropriate hypothesis. Another theory is Sid-March hypothesis of satisficing behavior. According to Simon, firms seek to achieve a satisfactory profit, a satisfactory growth, and so on. This behavior of firms is known as satisfaction behavior. Sid-March hypothesis is an extension of Simon's hypothesis. They added that along with an uncertain business world, managers have to satisfy a variety of groups of people: managerial staff, labor, shareholders, financiers, input suppliers, accountants, liars, authorities, etc. So the manager's responsibility is to satisfy them all. This is known as satisficing behavior of the firm. To reconcile between the conflicting interests and goals, managers form an aspiration level of the firm, combining production goal, sales and market share goals, inventory goal, and profit goal. These goals and aspiration level are set on the basis of managers' past experience and their assessment of future market conditions. These levels are revised on the basis of achievements and changing business environment. This theory is having some shortcomings also. It does not explain firms' behavior under dynamic conditions in the long run. It cannot exactly predict future course of firms' activities. It does not deal with industry's equilibrium, and this also fails to deal with interdependence. Another hypothesis is given by Rothschild, that is of long run survival and market share goals. So here the primary goal of the firm is long run survival. Some other economists are of the opinion that attainment and retention of a constant market share is an additional objective of the firms. Thus, managers seek to secure their market share and long run survival. And another objective is entry prevention and risk avoidance. Another objective is to prevent entry of new firms into the industry. The motive behind entry prevention may be profit maximization in the long run, securing a constant market share, or avoidance of risk caused by unpredictable behavior of new firms. So we have seen that there are various alternatives and broader theories of the firm which stress some relevant aspect of the operation of the modern corporation, but still they don't provide a satisfactory alternative to the profit maximizing objective of the firm. The stiff competition prevailing in most product and resource markets, as well as in managerial and entrepreneurial talent today, forces managers to pay close attention to profits lest the firm go out of business or they be replaced. Thank you.
With this note, thank you ma'am, thank you so very much. And dear friends, if you have liked today's lecture, so kindly give your feedback at info.cc@nic.in. We would be meeting again tomorrow and would be discussing more on the subject microeconomics. Till then, take care, goodbye. Thank you ma'am, thank you so very much.